If you cannot stay awake, I will make you stand. Like you can take notes standing up. I'll give you a clipboard. This is not a negotiation. Right, so sit all the way up. The back should be touching the back of your chair. Pencil should be in hand, and you should be listening and taking notes. Now, these notes are not necessarily something that I'm going to check. It's all on you. You want to take good notes, use them on the quiz, because you will have quizzes every day over what was covered the previous day, and that will make up your 60% of your grade right there. If you want to be able to use notes, then take good notes. If you don't care, then don't take notes, and then you'll see that reflected in your grade. Added to the list of materials that you need to have at your desk for testing will be your notes. So if you, for some reason, don't want to take them out, don't want to take notes, that's on you. Don't say I didn't give you the opportunity to. Well, yes. Yes, I'm not taking that. So I mentioned before, like we need to get a 60% before you take your. So like that 90% of your grade, the assessments and classwork combined, need to be a 60% or higher. Your first quiz is tomorrow. We'll have quizzes daily at the start of each day on whatever we covered the day before. Open note. So here's the first lesson of and it goes all the way back to unit 1. So we're talking about measures of center and measures of spread. By the end, you need to be able to understand and define them. The understand is a big one. I can show you how to calculate them easily with technology as well. But part of the understanding them is how they are calculated by you. So there's that. You need to be able to calculate things like mean and median, range and IQR. I'm also going to add to that list right here, standard deviation and MAD. Putting the abbreviations. But standard deviation and mean absolute deviation you will also be asked about. And the reason why they're grouped differently is because some are measures of center and others are measures of spread. So, first blank to fill in. Measures of center are used to describe a central or typical value of the data set. So, measures of center. Usually your mean or your median. So if it says which measure of center is best for this data set, well, your only options really are mean and median. You better not be saying a measure of spread. The best center. All right, those are keywords like central, typical. Sometimes they don't say what's the best measure of center. They'll say which one would best measure a typical value of the data set. And you would say either the mean or the median, depending on how it looks, which we'll get to that part tomorrow. Then we have this next blank, which will be measures of spread. And those are used to describe the consistency of data values. So like how close the values are to each other. So precision, if you're familiar with that, so the consistency. And some of the measurements we'll take to talk about how spread out the data is will be range, interquartile range, standard deviation, and I'm also going to add mean absolute deviation to this. So MAD, which stands for mean absolute deviation. All of which talk about how spread out the data is. So mean, and actually before I start asking you to define some of these for me, take like 2 minutes. I'm going to time it on my stopwatch right here. Take 2 minutes and try to fill out just like a basic definition for the ones that you recognize. They don't expect you to recognize all of them, but like me, if you can tell me another word for it, or how to find it, right here. Median, low, lower extreme, upper extreme, lower and upper quartile, all of these. Before I call on you to tell me a number. 2 minutes and try to listen to yourself. Okay, so who can tell me something about mean that they wrote down? And a word for it, how to find it, yes. It is not necessarily the yes. Average. So another word for mean is average. Now it does help describe like a central value, but I don't want you to get that middle because middle is a different word on this list. Okay, so average slash mean, say mean the same thing. How do you find the average of something? Yes. Okay, so wait till I'm in my pause or something, because right there as I'm going to answer my question. So looking for how you find the average of something. Or the mean, they both mean the same things. Yes. Good, you add up all the numbers, divide by however many numbers you add it. So to say that here, I would put it's your sum of the data divided by the number of data points. But the reason why I asked you guys to write down what you already know is because whatever definition you already have is probably going to be better for you when you are taking the quiz. Maybe some of you don't remember what sum of data is, that you're just adding up all the numbers. Maybe you don't know what I mean by number of data points. That just means how many numbers we have. All right, and that will give you your mean or average. So you will say. Now, that's really all I have to say about that. It tells you a typical value in the data set. So like the average temperature today, I don't know what it actually is today, but say it's like 100 degrees. That doesn't mean that it's going to be 100 degrees all the time. It's just an average. So what a lot of our temperatures today are centered around doesn't necessarily mean that it's all the it's like the typical value would be 100 base. Now for the median, that's the one that is what? Your middle number. Okay. Now that one specifically is the middle. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a number in the data set. It can be between the two middle numbers. So for this one, the definition, you probably already have a definition, but it should be something similar to the middle number when the data is in numerical order. That's a big one. So the middle number when data is in numerical order. So like I don't need my numbers to be in order when I'm just adding them all together and dividing by however many I have. But for my median, I need them to be in numerical order before I can tell you where the middle part of my data is. So say I had said okay. First, you'd want to put it in numerical order first. So if this is my random list. As an example, it would go 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, right? I started with 5 data points, I still have 5 data points, they're just now in numerical order. What would my median of this data set be? 4. This is my, for this random data set I ended up. If you just looked at this one over here and thought, oh, my median is 3, well, you're wrong. You have to put it in numerical order to then tell me what my middle number is. Now, that's when I have an odd number of data points. When you have an even number of data points, you should expect 2 numbers in the middle, and you'll have to average those if that happens. Okay, Logan, now if you wanted to go, so that's whatever more appropriate to ask. All right, mode. What does mode mean? What does mode sound like? It kind of leads to the definition. Another 4-letter word that starts with M. The mode tells me you're ready for me to tell you? Well, we'll figure it out. They're on a guess. All of this is prior knowledge, either from this year or middle school. So what is mode? What does mode sound like? That could lead you to its definition. Okay, well, I guess we'll just sit and stare at each other. If you're not willing to put yourself out there, if you're not willing to be led to an answer, like I just gave you a whole lot of hints. Mode, what does it sound like? That leads you to what its definition is. Not middle. Not mean, because then we wouldn't have separate rows for it, right? If they meant the same exact thing. All of that. Okay. Okay, what does it tell me about the data? Do I have a mode in this random set of data that I have? Okay, how do you know? How did you tell me no if that's not what mode is? So what is mode? No. So what could someone say in a certain set of data? Like what could they ask you to point out? We already talked about average, we already talked about middle number. Sorry, what was that? No, beginning of the end is something else that's on this list. Yes. Okay, so we're at least being willing to try, which I appreciate, but no. Well, I'm not going to help you. I gave you a whole bunch of it's 4-letter words, starts with M, sounds like both, what it is. What would be relevant in any set of data? How could you tell me that, no, there isn't a mode in this set of data that I made up? If you can't tell me what mode is, what is, how do you know there's one? What does mode sound like? So why over there? You told me that there was no mode in that set of data. How do you tell? You're right, there isn't a mode. Because mode is what? Yes. No. Sign it so many people get that thinking never. My first hour today, tell me. Okay, so now new set of data. If I told you to tell me what the mode is, what would you tell me? Sorry, what? No. So, okay, 7 and 9 would be the mode of this data set. So how do you know? Okay, so the mode is going to be the most, see that's what I'm trying to get you to get to. Mode, most, like literally starts say first syllable, 4-letter word, starts with M, is the most common value in the data set. So would that tell you a measure of center or a measure of spread? Does it tell me how spread out my data is? It tells me a typical value. So that's why it's here. Granted, it's not one of our main ones because we put usually a median, but it's like a distractor answer on some of your tests. I can't remember if it was on your final off the top of my head, but I know it was on your unit tests. So, not sure what happened there, but mode means the most common value data set. That's why there can be more than one. This little S in parentheses, that means like it could be your mode or your modes. In this random data set I made, there's 2. Because they both show up equal amounts of times. Now, if I add extra data points to this set, what's my mode now? Just 9, because then that would be the most common one. It's no longer times 7. I'm going to leave it off. But like, that's important to know because I've seen questions on a test say, what happens when we add this value to the data set? And one of the distractor answers is it changes the mode. So you have to know what it is to see if it's going to be changed or not. Questions? Okay, it's taking forever, so let's pick up the base. Again, it all be something we maybe heard of middle school last year before. So lower extreme, if we're talking about a data set, what do you think the lower extreme refers to? Use your context clues, yes? Okay, what do you mean by first number? If I write my numbers like this, does that mean that this is my lower extreme always? Yes? Okay, so if this is my data set, this little small data set I made, my lower extreme would be 7 because it is the lowest number in the data set. All right, trying to get you away from like misconception or means like big definitions, right? So if you put the first number, maybe add like when it's numerical. Because that one is not all the data will be. All right, but your lower extreme will always be the lowest number in your data set. What do we normally call the lowest number in our data set? Minimum. Good. That word we use more often than lower, but they mean the same thing. Upper extreme, what do you think that means? Highest number in the data set. People get hung up on the word extreme, like thinking it automatically makes it an outlier. Not necessarily. It just has to be the maximum value in your data set. All right, now these last 5, I expected you to at least tell me the first time. These last 5, I wouldn't necessarily expect as much for you to remember the definition of each. But things like interquartile range and standard deviation were talked about a lot last year. So I would expect you to at least be able to tell me something about those. But does anybody have anything for those last 5 on the list? Yes? Over. It's on my graph. So that's a good use of your critical thinking skills. However, they're not necessarily associated with graphs unless you're talking about box plots. All right. So the lower quartile and upper quartile you can see on box plots very easily. But can you tell me like where they are in data? So say I have this data set from earlier, so let me copy it over. All right, so say this data set from earlier we had. If I was going to find my lower quartile, note that we also call the median, want to add this in there, we call it our middle quartile. So our lower quartile, well, our median, let me go back to that. Our median would be the middle half of the entire data set, right? So what is the middle of this entire data set? 7. And you do that from going like left, right, left, right, left, right. So you get a middle number, or since I have an even number of data points now, I have a middle 2 numbers. Now they happen to be the same exact number, so that makes it easier, but ordinarily you take the average. So you do 7 plus 7, which is 14, divided by 2 makes it 7 for my middle quartile. That's my Q2, if you will. That's my median of my entire data set. Now, look at the same thing. I wrote it in the middle of those 7s because when we start talking about our lower and upper half of your data, so your lower quartile and your upper quartile, like your lower median and your higher median, you need to know what you're looking at. Again, look up at the screen. Not saying this for me, look up at the screen. When I'm finding my middle of my lower half, which is what this means, middle of the lower half of data, I need to never cross out the median. And now the median is in between these 2 7s. So when I am figuring out what my middle is of this lower half, because this would be my lower set first, I'm going to go left, right, that's technically not my median, and I have 2 numbers in the middle again. What's right in the middle of 4 and 5? So my Q1, my lower quartile, so yeah, we also call this Q1 right there, is 4.5. That's my middle of my lower half of my data. So like, I mean, maybe you don't drive yet, but the median is in the middle of the road. You never cross it. So you don't cross the median. Like I'm not crossing out this middle. Groups to find. All right, now the upper quartile will be called Q3 because Q2 would be my thing. That's going to be the middle of the upper half. So now look at your upper half of your data. Find the middle way of that set of data. So look at it. What's going to be my upper quartile? What's the middle of my upper half of data? Someone on this side of the room. Okay, so it can only be one number. What's in the middle of 8 and 9? Good. So 8.5 is my upper quartile because you go left, right, you see that there's two numbers in the middle. Take the average of them. 8 plus 9 is 17. 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. Yes? Yes. So then that is going to be my Q3, which is my median of my upper half. All right, this one we have to do a lot of averages. Not all the time we have to do that. It just depends on any number. All right, we're moving on. Range. Anyone remember a definition for range? Yes. It does have to do. Good. So like it does have to do like overall range, like when we talk about that in normal like language. Like if I talked about our range of ages, I don't know, let's take a guess. Say like the youngest person in here is 15 and then I'm 27, right? You would do 27 minus 15 like that. Encompasses all our different ranges of ages, right? So the range of any data set is going to be your maximum minus your minimum. So like if I go back to this random data set I was looking at, my range then would be 9 minus 3, which is 6. So like my data goes over 6 different numbers. Doesn't mean that every number is included, but like from my lowest to my highest point, it's spread out by 6. Good. Now, interquartile range, really remember like range is a subtraction problem. Because then that now leads you into this. Interquartile range is still a subtraction problem. But what do you think we're subtracting? Interquartile range or IQR range, it's always a subtraction problem. What do you think we're probably subtracting? If normal range is our maximum minus our minimum, yes. So it's your upper quartile minus your lower quartile. So like how range is your biggest number minus your smallest number, interquartile range is your biggest quartile minus your smallest quartile. All right, friend over there, look at the folder. All right, good questions on that. So with that data set that we already found the upper and lower quartiles to, if I wanted to find my IQR, I'd be doing 8.5 minus 4.5. What's the IQR of that data set then? how much is the middle half of our data spread out between? That's where I said, this is like back to kindergarten. Really need a calculator to do that, do it. 8.5 minus 4.5, it's 94. 4. That is how spread out my middle half of my data is. Right, this splits it into quarters. Here's my middle half of my data, it's spread out over 4 numbers. My entire data set is spread out over 6 questions. So all of these down here are measures of spread, including standard deviation. So standard deviation, I'm also going to loop in MAD because it literally, like, there's not much different other than like how to find each one. But we're not going to ever have to find each one by hand. We're just going to use technology to find these ones. But you need to know that it measures spread. If it's a measure of spread out your data is. And I guess what makes it unique compared to like IQR is that it uses the mean. And that's really all you have. Later, like tomorrow, we'll do a lesson for like how whenever you prefer the mean, you also prefer the standard deviation. Or however, when you prefer the median, you also prefer the IQR, right? But for now, you need to be able to define it. It's a measure of spread that uses the mean. Here is the formula for it. Again, you don't really even need to know how to use it. Didn't learn how to use it last year. We just learned how to find it with technology and what it tells us about the situation. All right, questions? Okay, so all of that, just defining, it took a while, but without a view. Now we're going to calculate all of those different things for this data set. And I'm going to add in, and you should too, the value for standard deviation, which actually you wouldn't know how to find those. But just leave those blanks. I'll show you how to find those with technology when we go over the rest of these. But just leave a spot for them. The rest you should be able to identify. So okay, Hayden, do you have the mean for this data set? Hayden C. Do we have the mean for the data set? Is a yes or no question? Okay, can you tell me, does my data set need to be in order for me to find the mean? Actually, no. So, now when you're being asked to identify all of these other things that do rely on it being in numerical order, then I would say a good place to start would be to put it in numerical order. However, if the question is only asking about the mean, you don't really have to put it in order to find the mean, because if we're taking the notes, which I hope we did, because quiz file. To find the mean or average, you're just taking the sum of the data and dividing by the number of data points. So they don't need to be in order to add up all the numbers and divide by however many numbers that there are. How many numbers are there? So whatever you put for the sum, you're dividing by 10. And I already know what it is, but I'm going to show you because some people are struggling to find the sum of the data. So it's literally as easy as typing it all in, putting plus signs in between it. You can condense some of it, like there's multiple tens or whatever, you could group those, but finding the sum, you can easily do with a calculator. All right. I don't need to see like you're doing super long addition on your
tests. Just put in your calculator, add it together. Then to find the average, the mean, we're doing 130 divided by however many numbers we added together, which was 10. Our mean is 13. All right, so if you got that right your first try, great. Questions? Let's see. Lakeland, did I say your name wrong? Okay. What is my lower extreme of this data set? 4 is correct, right? That was your number one. Let's see. Jenny, it's kind of going in a weird order. Jenny, why don't you tell me the upper extreme? 25 is my maximum value. I don't see a number higher than that. Other things you could probably figure out without putting it in order, maybe like the range now that we have that. But for the most of the rest of them, we need it to be in order. So let's start putting it in order. So like our smallest number is a 4. That's how I'm starting off my list. Logan B will be next. Okay, well, maybe I'll put that over here. What will come right after this 4 here? So I heard it back there. There is another 4. And then it would be 10 is the next highest. So you see like how as I'm like writing them down, I'm marking them off. Because if there is a duplicate, you need to list it. And also there can be multiple. Like right now I just covered 110. Over here, what would come next in our list? Another 10. Right behind her, what would come next? Another 10. Over here, what would come next? 14. 0 next. Over here, what would come next? Good, I forgot to cross out this. But yes. And then let's see, Kathleen will come next. And then that 25 from. All right, I started out, question? A little too far off. I started out with 10 data points, right? So usually whenever I reorder them, I go back and check. I started with 10 data points. I should have 10 in my list. And it's really important because you don't want to do all this work and go back and see that you forgot a data point. But it's questions. Okay, median, my middle number of my entire data set. Gunnar, what'd you get? Okay, can you tell me what my middle number is now that we put it in order? What'd you say? Okay, so let's see. I have 10 data points, that's an even number, so I should actually expect 2 numbers in the middle. So I'm going left, right, until I get a middle number or middle 2 numbers. So when you have 2 numbers in the middle, you have to take the average of them to get your median. So that would be you adding them together, dividing by however many numbers you added. So class, what's 10 plus 14? What's 24 divided by 2? So my median is actually 12. It's just whatever the middle point of your data is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a data point. 12 is perfectly in the middle of 10 and 14. Questions on that? Okay, so that's my Q2. I always put my median, like if it's a middle number, I'll circle it. If there's 2 numbers that I have to take the average of, I'll put like a little line down the middle. Because then when I find things like my lower quartile, I need to only be looking at my lower half of the data right here. Now find the middle of that. Go left, right, left, right. I really recommend crossing them out. But just never cross out what your actual meaning was. Well, my lower quartile is 10. I'll leave it. I didn't have to take an average of anything there. So there's only one number in the middle. Take a look at your upper half of your data. Think about what the upper quartile is. All right, what is the middle of my upper half of my data? So good. Right, and then again, we're going left, right, left, right. We just have one number in the middle that time. That's my Q3. Now IQR. Rodolfo, can you tell me what the IQR is? Okay, can you tell me the definition of IQR?
Oh,
Yep, so if my upper quartile is 16 and my lower one is 10, good, my IQR is 6. That's how spread out the middle half of my data is. Okay. I'm gonna box that up, because really my IQR is just a 6. But that's how we found it. Natalia, what's gonna be my range? All right, and what is my maximum minus the minimum? What's my maximum of this data set? Okay, and then what's my minimum? What's 25 minus 4? So my range is 6. All right, now your guys' favorite one. I hope you never forget mode now. What's the most common value in this data set? Good, I only have one mode, right? There's no other one that shows up 3 times. So just one mode for this one. All right, now these other 2 I told you, you can't really, well, I mean, you could do them by hand, but it's a long process and we're not going to. We didn't even do it last year or when you were in algebra. So I'm going to start showing you now because all of these can be found with technology. I'm going to show you that. And if you want to take some notes on how to do that, you know, fit it wherever you can. We're not necessarily going to do every single part of every single note sheet that I hand you. Okay, so I can tell you right now when we get to this one, we're really only doing this one. And I'll show you how to do that with technology if you want to start like jotting some stuff down in that free area. But standard deviation and MAD, we're only showing you how to find with technology. So here's how you do that. In Desmos, and you can do this with any handheld graphing calculator too, but you would have to look it up specific to your calculator. Usually in a separate cell, I'll put like a letter, and any letter works. I mean, there's a few of them that don't work. So I just like to pick like D for data. So I put D equals bracket. That's how it starts like thinking. You have to know how to type this in. And granted, I can't tell you this tomorrow during your quiz. You would have to know it already. So write it down for your notes. But D equals bracket, you would type in your data set separated by commas. And yeah, if it shows up multiple times, you need to put it multiple times. All right, remember I said I started with 10 numbers, so that's why it should say 10 element list, otherwise I forgot one. Now in a separate cell, and I could show you in this little functions menu, like, so I hit the keyboard, functions menu. This was the statistics unit. There's all these different things. Some of them I already asked you to find already by hand. Because I mean, you do need to understand them, and knowing how to find them by hand helps with that. But right now, like if I wanted you to find the standard deviation, there's two. Quite honestly, it doesn't really matter which one you use for this purpose. All right, they both measure spread. One is like for the population and one is like without it. They're both pretty similar numbers. All right, so like you could put the standard deviation is about 6.89. So really more like if we round it 6.9 or 6.5, depending on what you use. But that's just a measure of how spread out it is. Additionally, in that list, so functions, scrolling to statistics, you can see MAD, which I mentioned. And notice it already puts a parentheses. All you have to type in is what you called your data set, which I called it D. That is about 5.4. So 5.4, 6.9 are pretty close to each other. They're both measures of spread that use the mean in their formulas. So that's why they're pretty close to each other, but they are different. So like if tomorrow your quiz says calculate the MAD, this is what you would do. If it said to calculate the standard deviation, then you press the one that says standard deviation. But that's how you do that. And also, like I said, it has a bunch of other things in there, like mean, median. It can also tell you your minimum and maximum of a data set pretty easily. Some of these others are not as easy, but you can still use them. And I'll show you more with the data set that's on the back. So any questions on this side before I flip to the next side? Okay, so like I said, we're not doing every single problem. So we're skipping these two. They're not bad examples. They'll be in Schoology if you want to do them and look at them later. But we don't need to do all of them by hand. In fact, on your final exam, to save yourself some time, if you needed to calculate them, use technology. So this number 4 on the back of your note says, consider this data set. How will adding 10 to the data set affect the mean, median, range, and IQR? So instead of finding each of those values by hand and doing 8 calculations by hand, you can set it up in Desmos like how I taught you. Again, I can't tell you this tomorrow while you quiz, but you could take good notes and rewatch the video and do all that. But you just type in your data set, separated by commas. And that is 7 values, so that matches up my little list here. This would be like before adding 10 to the data set. We could do like, if we wanted to be fancy, B for before, A for after, right? Like you could change the letters that way if you wanted to. You can't do copy and paste while you quiz, but you can list it all out, write it on a separate piece of paper, and then type it in. So here's before the 10 was added, here's after the 10 was added. Let's compare the means. So you can also, for some of these functions, just type it in. If it's something it recognizes, it'll go from italic to like Times New Roman, basically. Or you can just find it in the little menu. If you're typing it, then you have to remember to put the parentheses. If you just find it in here, it'll automatically have it. But here's my mean before the 10 was added. And here's my mean after the 10 was added. Right? So you can use technology to do that. I can tell you though right now, because I have a good understanding of all of these different calculations. So here, before I get to that. So before adding 10, I'll put here, and then after adding 10. So before adding 10, it was like about 4.3. After adding 10, it was about 5. So how would you describe that change? Did it increase, decrease, or stay the same? Increase. All right, close the Chromebook. All right, so going from 4.3 to 5, increase. Good, you can describe the change. Now, what I was saying before I went off like on a tangent, wanting to write stuff down, I could tell you that it would have increased anyway without having to do any of the calculations. Because I'm adding a number that is higher than all of the other numbers in my data set. Think about how we calculated the mean. We added up all the numbers and divided by how many numbers there are. I'd be changing the numerator by a lot and the denominator by a little. So I could tell you without even doing the math that it would have increased. But a way to know for sure to prove it would be to do the math. Median, it kind of just depends. If there's a lot of the same number in the middle, then it might not change at all. Median is something that was in your little functions list, so it can verify the median for you. So let's see. B is what I'm calling it for before. It could be whatever you want to call it for your labels. So I have now my median for after. I called that A. So it went from 4 to 4.5. How would you describe that change? Did it increase, decrease, or stay the same? Now let's see, it asks about the range. Notice there was not a little thing for range. At least I don't think there was. So that's the one that it will not explicitly tell you. You have to either one, take your notes and use them and know how to identify your minimum and your maximum. Or, I mean, that's really it. Minimum and maximum is how you find range. So before adding 10, my biggest number was 7 and my smallest number was 2. What's going to be my range for this one then? For before adding 10? 5. For after adding 10, what does adding 10 change my maximum? So then it will change my range. Your range would not change if you were adding a number like to the middle, right? So if I'm changing what my maximum is, that will definitely change my range. Now it's 10 minus 2, which makes my range what? So it increased again. And IQR. So IQR is another one that the calculator won't explicitly tell you. I mean, some graphing calculators will, but this one doesn't. Desmos does not. It can tell you your quartiles, like with some of these buttons you see here, like quartile. So let me just show you real quick. However, when I type in one of the letters, notice like nothing comes up. If you hover over here, it could tell you why. There's 3 different quartiles in every data set. The first one, your second one, and your third one. So it requires you to specify which quartile it wants. So like if I want my third quartile 7. And that's for before adding 10, right? So you're kind of having to keep track of everything you're typing in if you're doing it that way. Since IQR is Q3 minus Q1, then I'd be having to find my first quartile. What's 7 minus 2? So that's my IQR before adding 10 is 5. And after adding 10, so I'm going to change these to A's so that it goes to the other data set that I listed. After adding 10 to the data set, my Q3 is now 7. My Q1 is now 2.5. What is my IQR after adding 10? 4.5. So did my IQR increase, decrease, or stay the same? It decreased. From 5 to 4.5, that's a decrease. So it's getting less spread out in the middle. So not just because one increases and the other one doesn't, like range versus IQR, it doesn't mean that it'll happen every time. It just depends where you're at. So a way to know for sure would be to do the calculations and actually see for yourself. All right, now I'm going to teach you one more thing on here that will make your life a little easier as well. Again, this is all stuff you can do on your quiz tomorrow, and it would not be considered cheating, but know that I also can't help you with this on your quiz. If you click on this functions menu and you look at your different menu of functions, you'll see one called stats. If you attach it to one of the letters you use for your data set, it pulls up this nice little menu of your minimum, your Q1, your median, your Q3, and your maximum. So that makes it even easier if you know how to use it. All right, questions, comments, concerns? What? I mean, I have other stuff to do, but anyone have questions on this? Oh, yeah, say that. Okay, so I'm going to pass out your practice, and mind you, everything that we do each day, if you haven't already looked at your Schoology, it's very well organized. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's not published, so all you should really see are a couple things right now, including a folder that says today's date. It'll have what we're doing each day there. Today we just barely scratched the surface. Normally we would do a lot more. But you see, like you did your pre-test, which is what takes so long. That's why we only got one thing done today. You have your notes for today with all the examples answered, not just the ones that we went over. And then you have your practice in case for some reason you lose it or something, you can view it here. And you can even upload it here if you needed to. I'm going to pass out your practice. It is on paper. And tomorrow at the start of class, we are going over it. So tomorrow you'll have to turn it in or show it to me. And then we're going over the answers, and then you're taking your first quiz immediately thereafter. Any questions on any of them? All right, even with there only being like 10-ish minutes, my first class of the day had 18 minutes. And how long it took you guys. Even though we only have like 10 minutes, I still think you can benefit, especially with the using technology aspect. There's no reason that you should have to have homework. If you finish it, I will have you put it in the metal bin. I'll put the metal bin back out. And get it back tomorrow, see how you did, and then you'll take your quiz there. No, the notes are just for you guys. That's what you use on your quizzes. Wanna like not take notes, not have that resource during your quiz? That's on you. I can't force you to do well on tests. I can't force you to understand anything. I can force you to listen to me, like removing all your other distractions. But that's all I can do.
Question.
Yes.
Still move.
The what?